They say temptation knocks quietly, but mine tore through the door and took everything I loved with it. And the worst part? I opened that door myself. It unfolded just beyond the confines of my backyard. The waning summer sun poured its golden light over our backyard, and I could savor the saltiness of sweat trickling down my lips. My legs quaked as I grasped the jagged edge of the partially mended fence. His presence was commanding, his gestures careful, but unmistakably close. I sensed his presence enveloping me from behind, his form robust and insistent. I yielded without a fight. I was unable to. The moment felt reckless, and I was no longer composed in his presence. He let out a deep, hungry groan in my ear, and I whispered his name as if it were a secret confession. I felt overwhelmed by every moment shared between us. As our moment ended, I collapsed in disbelief. I had just enacted the most profound betrayal of my existence with my neighbor, Damon, whose skin was as dark as the night. Yet, the most disheartening aspect was my insatiable desire for more. Before I embark on this candid and heartfelt revelation, I wish to extend my deepest gratitude to all who've chosen to subscribe to this channel. Your support sustains the vitality of this platform. Whether you're a newcomer or a silent observer, your presence is genuinely valued. I eagerly anticipate your click on that subscribe button, for it serves as the vital fuel that drives this narrative forward. Kindly share your reflections in the comments section. Your insights resonate with me, and they play a crucial role in shaping the narratives we craft moving forward. Allow me to transport you to the moment it all started. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Emily. At the age of 37, I find myself as a devoted housewife residing in a tranquil neighborhood in Texas. My husband Greg is a good man, reliable and predictable. In the silence of our shared dinners, I began to count the spaces between his words. I no longer felt like a wife, only a presence beside him. As a mortgage advisor, he finds solace in spreadsheets, a passion that seems to have eclipsed the intimacy we once shared over the past 3 months. Then there is Damon, standing tall at 6 feet 3 inches, with dark chocolate skin and muscles that appear to strain against the fabric of every shirt he dons. He resides just 2 houses away, accompanied by his teenage daughter. Years ago, his wife departed from his life. He has always struck me as the strikingly handsome, reserved neighbor, tending to his lawn in the sun, shirtless, and offering a casual wave as I nurtured my flowers. The fence had been deteriorating for weeks, each day revealing more of its disrepair. Greg repeatedly promised to address the issue, yet the man scarcely found a moment for dinner, much less for any handyman tasks. On a Friday morning, as I leisurely sipped wine on the back porch, I noticed Damon approaching, clad in tattered jeans and a sleeveless shirt drenched in sweat. He gestured toward the fence. I observed that this has been deteriorating. Would you like my assistance in resolving this issue? I acquiesced with undue haste. My voice became ensnared in my throat. Indeed, my gratitude is profound. That would be wonderful. That same afternoon, I slipped into a sundress that revealed just the right amount of cleavage and hugged my hips a touch more snugly. I convinced myself it was merely a means to keep my composure in the sweltering heat. But part of me knew it wasn't the weather I was preparing for. Yet, beneath the surface, I was aware of my desire to be seen. The initial hour of labor was untainted. I offered him lemonade, chuckled at his dry humor, and observed the way his arms flexed with each strike of the hammer. I found myself lost in thought, my gaze fixed intently. He ensnared me as well. "Are you okay, Emily?" he inquired, dabbing at his forehead. It was a scorching response, I said, uncertain whether I was referring to the weather or to him. Perhaps a combination of the two. As he rose from his kneeling position, our gazes intertwined. The air was heavy with an enveloping silence. Silence envelopes the landscape, devoid of birdsong or the gentle caress of a breeze, leaving only the oppressive weight of heat. His gaze was daring, as if he were peeling away my layers right there in the open. And I allowed him to proceed. "I could use a break," he remarked. "Shade lies waiting behind the fence," I suggested. No one ever ventures back there. He trailed behind me, concealed by the fence, hidden from the gaze of the street, the homes, the universe. My heart pounded in my chest, echoing like a drum in a marching band. He was mere inches away, and I could sense the warmth of his breath. He inclined his body gradually. I ought to have retreated. I ought to have declined, yet I chose not to. Every voice of reason inside me screamed, but desire had drowned them all. When our lips collided, it was anything but gentle. It was an inferno. The impact of my back against the fence reverberated through me. His hand glided up my thigh. The fabric of my sundress fluttered upwards. Silence enveloped the space. He pressed forward, his desire evident as he moved my undergarments aside. He moved with a deliberate grace, reminiscent of someone well-versed in the art of persuasion, effortlessly guiding a woman to yield. I sensed him draw closer, filling a silence I hadn't known existed. I clung to the fence, breathless and yearning, as he moved with intensity. I had never experienced anything quite like that, not even with my husband. It was unrefined. It was unrefined. It was unrefined. And yet, within that chaos, I felt more alive than I had in years. When it ended, I felt both shame and release. I trembled, drenched, and inexplicably content. We stood there, breathless, enveloped in silence, our breaths deep and labored, hearts swelling with unspoken emotions. I arrived back at my abode, still trembling with the weight of what I had done. Greg returned home that evening, brushed his lips against my cheek, and expressed his gratitude for my reminder to Damon about the fence. I offered a smile and a nod, feigning that all was well. Yet it was not merely a fleeting thought. Deep within me, I still sensed Damon, and the longing to experience him once more surged through me. Sleep eluded me that night. With each closure of my eyes, the fence pressed into my back, and his voice lingered in my mind like a ghost. I exhaled as the memory of Damon overwhelmed me, the weight of guilt lingering on my tongue. My thighs ached, not merely from our actions, but from the depth of my desire. And even more troubling, how deeply I craved for more. I reclined beside my husband, Greg. As was customary, his back faced me. He drifted into slumber soon after dinner, too weary to perceive the passage of time as I remained in the bathroom. I lingered for more than half an hour, my legs quaking as I scrubbed my skin beneath the relentless cascade of water, desperately wishing to rinse away the haunting memory of Damon, yet nothing could cleanse me of his presence. Even the steam couldn't fog the image burned in my mind. Every drop felt like a confession I couldn't speak. The following morning unfolded in a stillness that felt almost oppressive, a silence that lingered in the air. Greg departed for work at dawn, bestowing a gentle kiss upon my forehead. I feigned slumber. It was simpler than pretending while fully aware. As soon as the door clicked closed, I hurried to the mirror. I gazed at my reflection, bare, blushing, still bearing the traces of what had been. Faint marks reminded me of how far things had gone. The lingering essence of sweat, sunlight, and a tinge of shame clung to my neck. I brewed a cup of coffee, yet its flavor eluded my senses. I tidied the kitchen not once, but twice. I attempted to immerse myself in a magazine, yet each word faded into the haze of a singular, persistent thought. I told myself it was a one-time mistake, a lapse in judgment, but my body refused to forget. What if it occurs once more? I convinced myself it was merely a fleeting error, yet my body had a different narrative to tell. As the clock approached noon, I found myself gazing out the window, observing Damon as he diligently raked leaves by his porch. Once more, without a shirt, his skin shimmered in the sunlight, reminiscent of bronze coated in oil. He discovered my gaze upon him. I remained steadfast, my gaze unwavering. Then a smile graced his lips. That smile held a meaning I was all too familiar with. Later that afternoon, I ventured outside, ostensibly to inspect the repaired fence. He stood there, feigning an examination of the wood. "You overlooked a detail," I remarked, striving to maintain a calm tone. He pivoted, his gaze meeting mine with a piercing intensity that left me utterly exposed. "No," he replied. "I did not overlook anything. Perhaps you arrived to discover whether I truly did." A constriction gripped my throat. I yearned to articulate something profound, to feign a semblance of mastery, yet in truth, I possessed none. He inched nearer, his fingers grazing my elbow, and I nearly fell into him. He leaned closer, his voice barely a murmur. "Are you interested in discussing the events of yesterday?" I nodded in silence, the words unspoken between us. Every instinct in me knew I should run, but curiosity and craving bound my feet to the ground. We found ourselves within the confines of his garage. The air was thick with heat, shrouded in darkness, and infused with the rich scents of oil and wood. With effortless grace, he swept the workbench aside, as if it were nothing more than a collection of feathers. I took my seat unbidden. My sundress fluttered once more, as if it held a memory of yesterday's events. He knelt between my legs, and this time his kiss was slow and deep, as if he sought to savor every fragment of my guilt. As he rose to his feet, I leaned in closer, letting the intensity of the moment take over. It was dense, dark, oh, formidable. I encircled it with my hand, lowering my mouth deliberately as I observed him biting his lip. He clutched me with intensity, as if the moment might never return. And when it ended, I felt both shame and release. I told myself this was closure, but deep down, I feared it was only the beginning. The moment I wiped my lips and rose, the shame washed over me once more. "Emily," he murmured, his breath coming in quick gasps. "What is our current endeavor?" I found myself unable to respond. I merely pressed my lips to his for a fleeting moment before departing. That evening, Greg returned home ahead of schedule. He arrived with a bouquet of tulips, my absolute favorite. A wave of guilt crashed over me, heavy and unyielding. "I thought we might venture out this weekend," he suggested. "Only we remain. Perhaps reignite a flicker of passion." I smiled, deceived him, and said that it sounded delightful. As the night deepened, we surrendered to each other in a dance of intimacy. He made an attempt, or so it seemed. He possessed a gentle nature, excessively soft. He scarcely endured 5 minutes. He inquired whether I had arrived. I deceived once more, claimed I had, pressed my lips to his, turned away, and wept quietly into my pillow. There, in the darkness beside the man who vowed to love me forever, I felt utterly alone. The following day, I steered clear of Damon. I was acutely aware that encountering him once more would lead me to surrender. I dedicated my time to household tasks, meticulously folding laundry that had already been neatly arranged and ironing garments that were perfectly fine as they were. I scrubbed the kitchen floor until my knees ached, but the more I resisted, the stronger the pull became. Desire had carved itself into my muscle memory. It wasn't just a thought. It had become a reflex. Just when I thought I had survived the day, it all shifted again. A soft knock echoed at the back door. I opened it, and there he stood, bare-chested once more. "You left this on my porch," he remarked, lifting a delicate pink lace thong for emphasis. I had not even come to the awareness that it was gone. He entered unbidden, as if the threshold held no barriers for him. He shut the door firmly behind him. I retreated, yet my body remained unfaithful to my intent. As his lips met mine, I felt myself dissolve once more. Whatever willpower I had was no match for the electricity between us. Following that moment, it transcended mere error. It unfolded as a pattern, a hidden truth, a life lived in the shadows. With each passing day, I found myself plunging further into the depths of the affair. Greg's bed was a relic of the past, yet my body, my insatiable longing, was claimed by Damon. With each second I lingered in his embrace, the weight of guilt congealed in my chest, heavy and suffocating like tar. I was no longer merely cheating, I was unraveling. I was acutely aware that it was merely a question of time before the truth would come crashing down, dismantling everything in its wake. For secrets as tainted as these, they never remain hidden for long. On a Tuesday morning, The atmosphere was serene and unremarkable, the sort of day that seems destined to unfold without incident. Greg had pressed his lips to mine in farewell, just as he always did. Yet, on this occasion, there was an unmistakable quality to it, as if he possessed a hidden knowledge. Perhaps it was merely paranoia that gripped me, for by that time, I had mastered the art of deception. Each smile was a mere facade. Each dinner I presented, every tender kiss exchanged at night, every sigh shared in the dark, all of it was cloaked in betrayal. My true passion resided just beyond the fence, coursing through my veins and enveloped in the heat of my guilt. Each time I encountered Damon in the open air, I reassured myself that it was merely a physical connection, devoid of significance, and that my love for my husband remained intact. Yet, that was the most egregious falsehood of them all. Because even lies, when whispered long enough, begin to echo like truth. As the clock approached noon, a gentle knock echoed through the kitchen door. The knock that had grown all too recognizable. The rap that stirred every fiber of my being. As I swung the door open, there stood Damon, waiting on the threshold. His expression was devoid of smiles or playful banter, marked instead by a solemn demeanor. "We must have a conversation," he stated. I moved to the side. He entered and positioned himself by the sink, his palms rubbing together as if anxiety coursed through him. Never had I encountered him in such a manner. "I can no longer continue down this path. Emily," he said, "you are married. This is incorrect. I ought to have given a nod. I ought to have consented. I ought to have brought it to a close at that very moment. Yet I drew nearer and murmured softly, 'Why does it feel so undeniably right?' He seized me and pressed his lips against mine with a fervor that suggested he was wrestling with his own desires. My back collided forcefully with the refrigerator. My fingers clawed at his belt. I sighed softly as he drew closer once more. Profound, unrefined, relentless. There in my kitchen, the sunlight streaming through the open curtains, I found myself on the floor. It was the dirtiest, most audacious act we had ever committed, and I relished every moment of it. I reclined on the frigid tile, my body half-clad, breathless, with my legs quaking beneath me. He hoisted his trousers back into place and declared, "This must be the final time." "I truly mean it." But we had said that before, hadn't we? And each time we meant it a little less. Yet, deep down, I was certain he would return, and I was equally aware that I would welcome him once more. We had crossed the threshold from which there was no turning back. That evening, Greg returned home, his eyes reflecting an unusual depth of emotion. Neither angry nor suspicious, he simply inquired with an icy demeanor, "Was there anything noteworthy that occurred today?" I paused momentarily, then resolutely shook my head. "No, just chores," he nodded, his gaze unwavering, still fixed on mine. "Emily," he uttered with deliberate slowness, "do you recall the security cameras I set up last year when we suspected someone was pilfering packages?" My heart ceased to beat. He went on, "I had completely forgotten about them. Today, I reviewed the footage." Stillness. He then inquired, "Would you mind clarifying why your neighbor spent more than an hour in our kitchen?" I parted my lips, yet silence enveloped me. He rose from his seat and made his way to the living room. Upon his return, a flash drive was clutched in his hand. "I witnessed it all," he declared. "All things." In that instant, my world stopped spinning. I wasn't caught in a lie. I was buried beneath the truth. Breath eluded me. My knees gave way beneath me. I sank to the ground, tears streaming down my face. I offered my apologies in a hushed tone. "I had no intention of doing so." He interrupted me. "You have done it repeatedly. Please refrain from offering me insincere apologies." I extended my hand toward him, yet he recoiled, creating a chasm between us. "I seek a divorce." The subsequent days unfolded in a haze, documents scattered, legal consultations, muted meals, and frigid evenings. He took up residence in the guest room. In the end, he ceased all communication with me. Damon has disappeared. He ceased his visits to the porch. The garage remained securely locked. The light faded from his house. He had obtained his desires and abandoned me amidst the wreckage. Greg has departed from his residence. In an instant, all that I held dear has slipped away. My union, my self-respect, and the sole man who has ever genuinely cherished me. And all for what? A touch? A thrill? A fire that burned through everything I was? All for the sake of succumbing to the allure of the forbidden. Because I exhausted more than my emotions. I depleted the essence of my own existence. Here I find myself, solitary in this still abode. Each creak in the floorboards echoes the remnants of a love I shattered. Each look at the fence evokes memories of the man who shattered my world and the woman I allowed myself to transform into. And if I had the chance to return, would I choose to relive it all once more? The most challenging aspect lies there. Because even now, standing in ruins, I still don't know the answer. The answer remains elusive to me.